Welcome to the Men After God podcast, where you will be challenged and encouraged as you pursue God, achieve success, and raise a thriving family. Join your host, Dustin, and his guests on a weekly journey to grow as husbands, fathers, and men after God. Here is your host, Dustin Alley.
Hey guys, welcome back to another week of the Men After God podcast. This is going to be one of my favorite interviews, and I know that just because I know the men we're talking to, and I've been talking with them even before we started here. This is going to be a great time, and so much value is going to come to you from this. One of the dreams, I believe, of every man that starts a business and tries to achieve success for Christ is that their family would follow them, especially their sons. They'd work with them some way and somehow. And today, we're talking to two men that God has used in great ways, and that has happened to them. They both serve in the same ministry together. And that journey to get there is just providential by God, number one. And secondly, a fun one, one where they've had to navigate it ups and downs. And now they're working together to really elevate each other in what God has for them. So today's discussion is just going to be phenomenal for any of you that have children. You'd love to come into the family business, whether that's ministry or a business or whatever it is you're doing. And then also for a great perspective from your children, from your sons, and what they're seeing as you're going through life seeking to be a man after God. Without further ado, let me introduce our guest today. I've got Pastor Cary Schmidt, father and author, who's here with us. He's going to talk to us about his newest book in just a minute called Steady Strength. And by the time this airs, it'll already be available, so the links will be in our show notes. And then his son, Pastor Lance Schmidt, both from Emmanuel Baptist Church. Pastor Lance is the worship pastor there. He's won awards for his musical efforts and things like that. Just a phenomenal worship leader and has invested in many people across the country. God's just used them both in amazing ways. So Pastor Cary, thank you. And Lance, thank you for being here today. I want to hear about your book. Let's start talking about that, Steady Strength. Talk to us about that for a few seconds, Pastor Cary.
Thanks for having us on, Dustin. I'm looking forward to the conversation. So by the time this airs, this book will be available. I'm going to put it up on the screen here real quick. It's called Steady Strength, Reversing Ministry's Dangerous Drift Toward Depletion. And Lance designed that awesome cover, so shout out to Lance. But anyway, it launched November the 7th. It's aimed at leaders. So not just ministry, although the center of the target is ministry. The principles of the book are soul health, sustainability, and I think anybody in any kind of leadership capacity could benefit from it, but especially those in ministry, because ministry has its unique sources of drain and depletion. And if we don't compensate for those unique things, then we find ourselves kind of hitting a wall. So I pray it'll be a blessing and encouragement. I hope your listeners will pick it up.
Oh, I know they will. And it sounds like a next step, if you will, from Stop Trying, your book that came out a year or two ago. And was that kind of the idea of when you went into writing this? Was it it's kind of a build off
Stop Trying
of that?
is more gospel identity, which is liberating and kind of restful for the soul. So they are connected in terms of the ministry they would provide. Steady Strength takes that identity and presses into it with from the perspective of a spiritual leader and a pastor. And especially this book talks about really the core of leadership and how the depletion can result because of faulty motivations or expectations. And then it talks about our customs or our practices, disciplines in our life that can maintain or sustain health, soul health. And then it talks about culture. That's part 3, basically how the culture we lead is not only influencing others, but ourselves. We contribute to the culture, but then we kind of consume it as well. It's like the air we breathe. So it has a life-giving property to it. So the inside, the lifestyle, and then the environment of our, it kind of all contributes to soul health. And that's really the overview of the book.
Oh, I love that, Pastor Cary. I'm going to drive over there. I think I saw you had a box of them at your house.
Yeah, I do.
I know you live close. I'm going to come get a signed copy. I can't wait to have that. Well, listen, that really leads us into some of our discussion today. And again, Pastor Cary, you said it before we got on here, what God's done with your life is providential. It's of the Lord. We give him all the glory for it. Mm-hmm. And throughout your life, I know you've had to work to get to where you are, to publish like you have, and to do the things you've done. And Lance, I know you've seen your dad go through that stuff. I'd love for, and both of you can kind of key in on this discussion. Pastor Cary, the things you've learned that you write about now, was some of that from a life lived in opposition to what you're currently, writing about?
That's a bit of a strong word, opposition. I wouldn't say that it's that cut and dry. I would
Okay.
say for anybody that's motivated to be a faithful steward of life, there is a natural tension all the way through the journey between overdrive and underdrive. Okay. Underdrive is poor stewardship. Overdrive is poor stewardship. But we don't always know where the line is. At what point am I doing the right things at the right pace in the right balance? And then, one centimeter further is overdrive. Okay. And then 1 centimeter less is underdrive. And you never get it perfect, but you are managing that tension all of your life. And there have been plenty of seasons of my life where I was on overdrive and needed to course correct. And then there are other seasons I was on underdrive and needed to press in and light the fire. So I think I would rather fight that battle my whole life and never get it perfect than not fight it and fall off the horse on either side of the road.
And in fighting that battle over the years, I've heard you mention before of how Dana has been a resource for you to kind of let you know. And for our listeners, Dana is Pastor Cary's wife. Dana has been a resource for you to let you know kind of when you're there. And you've always promoted anytime I'm around, like listen to your wives. They can there. Mm-hmm. Lance, I'd love to hear from you of times you may have seen your dad in that overdrive season. What was that like for you? Just kind of growing up with that and seeing him steward and manage this.
Go easy, Lance.
To be honest with you, I really didn't know my dad until I was about 8 years old. So,
okay. All right,
we're really starting to just, develop the close relationship that we should have had.
Here we go.
No, I feel awesome. Like, I
didn't really see him until he was 7. So
finally, when he got cancer, towards the end of my high school years, it was like, okay, I can finally spend some time with him, it's terrible. Honestly, just to, I guess to speak to that, there were plenty of times growing up that I saw him, push and work hard, which I think, this is kind of a whole other thing that we could talk about, but I think that's really healthy for a son to see in a dad, just that figure that they're looking towards in their life for what is what's a good male role model look like. I think it was there was a large part of my childhood that it was very healthy to see him push and work hard and be successful, whatever, however you would define that. But I guess the way that I would describe it is a lot of times it would kind of come and go in seasons. And there were many times throughout my childhood that he'd be working late or working on special projects or, working a side job to, help provide more for our family. And I think during those times, was it a bummer, at times or was it, maybe hard to deal with? Yeah. But I think that those were seasons. And I think what my dad was really, really good at was coming out of those seasons. He would really help us understand, first of all, as his kids, hey, this was a season, this was for a time. So we're going to get back to normal now. And this is what normal is going to look like from here, and he was really good at just scheduling pockets of time where he got with us individually as kids and then where we did stuff together as a family. And so just to kind of lay that out real quick, his days off were Thursday every week. And so it was very often on his day off that he would just set aside work and just really spend time with us. It wasn't uncommon for him to take us out of school and go do something special, even during a busy season. Maybe where he knew he'd have to work late, he'd come in and yank us out of school for a couple hours and go in and take us out to In-N-Out and things like that. So I think he was good at kind of finding those pockets of time, but also blocking off those family vacations and really making those a priority our family to reconnect and just kind of make that a staple every year. I grew up going on a 1 or 2 week, break with our family every year. And so growing up, I thought that was completely normal. And now that I'm an adult, having to find that time for my own family and seeing this in other families' lives, I'll tell you, that's not normal.
No, it's not.
What's normal is actually the opposite, where guys are so into, being driven and their, careers and, again, what their perceived success is. And they're so into that they're not even using their time off, or if they are, it's, a day or two here. So he was really good at finding those pockets of time, investing back into us, and then blocking out those larger chunks of time, family vacations, to where we knew, okay, we're going to get dad's undivided attention, no matter what, for 2-3 weeks a year. And then, apart from that, he's going to be faithful to our family, to love us.
Man, that is awesome. Pastor Cary, it sounds like you were very intentional during those seasons. And I know the joke was made there, and I'm sure there's maybe something to it. I'm not seeing really 7 years old and things. Was there something that kind of triggered that you living out that lifestyle, or was that something you and Dana kind of decided as parents early on, like this is how our lives are going to be as parents?
So we just, we got married young. We got married when we were 20, and we started in ministry at 21, 6 months later. And then we had Lance. I think Lance, I think I was still 21 when Lance was born. I'd have to do the math, but anyway, so, brand new marriage, brand new ministry, in a fast growing church and a brand new family. So I would say the first 5 years were a tug of war that I didn't know how to balance it all. And it was changing week to week. And it was good seasons, bad seasons, good moments, bad moments. And there was tension, mostly, he wouldn't remember this, but mostly between me and Dana over the balance and the values. And I felt this passionate, yearning and anxiety, frankly, to be faithful to God and to pursue, whatever idea of success spiritually is. I've come years later to define success very simply. Success is obedience to Jesus, like, period. If I'm disobeying him, I'm failing. And if I'm obeying him, I'm succeeding, regardless of what the results look like.
Yes.
So typically we think of success as results, outcomes, consequence, fruit, and maybe financial terms and other things. That's not success. Success is, am I doing what God created me to do? And am I obeying and following him? But we hit a place about 5 or 6 years in. So Lance would have been 3 or 4, where we just realized this is not sustainable. This way of living. And my youthfully naive conclusion was that ministry demands too much and I need to get out of ministry. That was ill-informed, and it would have been very premature. And actually, I resigned. I went to the pastor that I worked for, and I resigned. I tell this story in the book we were talking about, thinking I would take either a different position in that ministry out of the pastoral tier, or that I would serve as a faithful church member, but find another way to support my family that would allow me more margin. And what happened was a recalibration of life at the counsel of my pastor, which was such a blessing. And we restructured my whole workflow. And at that time, I read a book called First Things First by Stephen Covey. This book changed my life in that moment. And that book admonished a weekly practice that, to some degree, I have done every week since that time. So that was, 30 years ago. And what's striking me, and this is a bit of a rabbit trail, indulge me for 30 seconds on this. It strikes me that here I am, here Lance is telling these stories. And what I want to say to every young dad is, your kids are going to grow up and talk about you. They're going to grow up
by this podcast,
and they're going to have stories to tell. And Lance has got a lot of embarrassing stories to tell, and he could tell you about all my failures. He is a much better dad than I am, and my other son Larry is a much better dad than I was, and am. And it's funny to hear him talk about me in past tense. I feel almost like I'm dead, like my dad was this. So that's a scary reality because it happens very quickly. And what Lance talked about, vacations and family times and busy seasons being compensated for, and school being a second priority to family. These are uncommon practices. But what the Covey book challenged me to do was every week look at my life roles and balance them intentionally. And if I couldn't get a night at home, which typically that was a couple times a week at least, and if not more, even in a busy ministry. But if I looked at a particularly busy season and I couldn't find that time of when am I going to be a dad, then I'd take them out of school at lunchtime, and we'd spend the afternoon and go do something else. And did the teachers like that? Of course not. But the teachers work for us as the family. They serve us. So just every week evaluating, every single week. How did we do last week? Where are we at this week? What's next week going to be looking like? And here's what changed it for us. You're never more than 7 days out of whack. Every 7 days, you're looking at your relational world and going, are we okay? And if we're not, we can correct it. 7 days out of whack is easy to correct. 6 months out of whack, a year out of whack, your family's falling apart. So that's what changed the game for us, and it still does.
I love that. That's awesome. And now, Lance, your dad's talking about this, and just for our listeners, Pastor Carey is the pastor of Emmanuel Baptist, and the Emmanuel Baptist has a school, Emmanuel Christian Academy, where my children go, and so does Lance's kids. So, Lance, I don't know about you, but what I just heard is the pastor told me I don't have to send my kids to school if I don't want to. And
that's
that's
exactly what I said, and that's exactly what I meant.
Yeah, and joking, but I know this
joking.
to be true. And Lance,
I'll tell
very
you a
well.
story.
I'm going to get my kids by.
There was a night that there was a week that we had a really busy week, and I felt like our kids needed family time. Yeah. And they came. It was I forget what day of the week it was, but they came home with all kinds of homework and stuff that they had to do, and it was hours and hours, and we wouldn't have gotten the family night we needed. And I just looked at them and I said, "Guys, we have no homework tonight," and they panicked. And they couldn't process this. And I said, no, we have no homework tonight. You're not going to do your homework tonight. We can do it tomorrow. We'll make it up. I will write you a note. And even if your teacher gives you demerits, that's okay. They could not process that. I wrote a note. I said, the kids did not do their homework last night. It's my fault. I would not let them. We will make it up. But that's what we needed as a family. Do what you need to do as a teacher, even if you need to give them demerits. I'm not going to have a problem with that. But now, did we do that every week? No. Right. But there's exceptions, and the school is here to serve the family. So
I love that. And Lance, I've watched you as a dad, and I know that Chad and Charlie, this is Lance's kids. This is always fun. I used to stand at the door, and I loved how we knew it was time to close up when Chad and Charlie had come in, right? And my son is in Chad and Charlie's grade, and he shared with me, oh, hey, they were out of school, or they did this, they did that. So I'm saying this, and I'm going to say it this way for you to kind of answer and expound on. It sounds like you've taken that philosophy and applied that even in your own life as a parent and things. And are there any other things that your dad kind of helped instill in you that you now do as a father?
I have, yeah. Just to kind of go back to what my dad was saying, thankfully, right now I'm working on getting my GED. I'm almost there. So it's been quite the journey, but thankfully I'm recovering from this.
At least we know where this goes. You got a great family.
Philosophy, right?
Get the GED, right?
Yeah, Lance is really dumb, but he's a great guy. What's funny is I was going to say, our kids have great educations. They did fine, but anyway, it's funny. Lance, go ahead.
Yeah.
No,
can't say it now. Yeah.
No, just to kind of tell a quick funny story. So growing up, we were almost always late to school. And I'll own that. It was mostly my fault. I'm just slow getting ready in the mornings and getting out of bed and all that. I'm not a morning person. And so I'd always make us late to school. And the way that our school policy was growing up was if you get, I think it was 9 tardies, you got suspended from school. And so, just to talk about how we used this family time creatively, after those 9 tardies, my dad said, all right, you guys are suspended from school. So we're going to Disneyland this Friday. So, there's
which is why he kept being late, by the way. He was motivated.
It definitely incentivized
it. Got it.
Yeah, it definitely incentivized it. And obviously it's flowing into my life right now. No, but I mean, honestly, right now, it's probably more just because we live about 25 or 30 minutes from the church. And so from the church and the school. So in the mornings, getting our kids there, we're still kind of figuring that out, having lived at our, new place for the last year. But that being said, we have adopted that same, value system. I think there is an element of, man, sometimes my kids come home, they're stressed out because they have this to do or that to do. And many times we'll still help them get that done. But even just in our conversations with them, we're helping them understand, guys, we're your parents, so like to some degree, we're going to give an account for these things too. So tonight we're going to spend family time. We're going to watch this movie. We're going to do this together. We're going to go out to eat. I think that value system has definitely trickled down into the way that Hillary and I parent our kids. And it's been a huge, huge win, I think. Anytime that a parent starts to worship, something other than what God intended for their life, I think this could flow into extracurricular activities like sports. This could flow into, obviously, up here in New England, especially, it flows right into our academics. I mean, nobody up here misses school ever, for anything. And so I think anytime, just to kind of speak to the broader conversation, anytime that our value system as parents starts to get out of whack, all of a sudden, before we know it, we can be unintentionally kind of worshiping something as a family and letting that control our lives and our schedule, without kind of stepping back and, reevaluating.
And it very much becomes performance driven. I'm guilty of that. A type A personality with drive and ambition. It's definitely, Pastor Cary, it's one reason I think your book's going to be so great personally for me, is just, again, continuing to work at, tempering that underneath the direction and leading of the Holy Spirit and following after what God has for me in the way that God has for me to accomplish it. The value system that we create, and this is for our listeners, guys. Again, I know Pastor Cary mentioned his book is primarily targeted to ministry leaders. I know many of you that aren't in ministry. Just remember, like you've heard with many of our guests and that we've interviewed, the work of the ministry has many similarities to what you'll find in business and entrepreneurship. Now, there is a difference, and we understand that. However, the hours, the bookkeeping meetings, the payroll, the various things of that nature all still have to be cared for. And so, and then again, you have metrics in a sense. Now, they're viewed a little differently from a ministry perspective, or should be, but you have goals in your business you're trying to accomplish. And if you begin to pursue after, or Lance used the word worship, those things, and you carry that down into your kids for worshiping their grades, their attendance, their sports and stuff, that's going to become the ultimate value. And now they're going to not only neglect their selves and their identity in Jesus, they'll begin to neglect the personal relationships that they need to have with their family and with those that are around them, because it no longer benefits what they ultimately value. And so, man, I love that you guys brought that in. Now, Pastor Cary, you've been in ministry for, I'm not going to take it, I think 30 or more years. Is that right? Yeah. 34 years. And pastoring up here at Emmanuel 11
mm-hmm.
11 years. And Lance, I know a little bit of the story, I think, but you didn't come with your dad right away. There was a a break there. How was it that you came on as the worship pastor at Emmanuel Baptist? And feel free to share about how you helped everyone hit their X, Y's, and Z's. We would, just love to.
We won't share that story, Dustin.
Oh man. Okay. All right.
So, so my parents came here, let me see here. I think it was August of 2012 or maybe September 2012. And I did finish high school to kind of tie up our last conversation. And, I had finished college, about 3.5 years. So I had another probably 3 months of, classes left. So I stayed there in, Lancaster. And I finished my degree in December, and then I moved out here, I think, later that January. And I mean, without going all into this story, I had felt God kind of tugging on my heart and calling me to help the work up here the summer before. So the summer before, I was kind of traveling tour for our college, and had been talking to a few different pastors just about what my future might look like after college, and had a few different opportunities, and I just didn't feel a peace, if you will, about any of them. Like I prayed about them, I sought the Lord, and I just thought, man, I don't know what I'm going to do, but let me just dive into this last semester. I'll finish, and we'll see kind of what happens from there. And that fall, God really just confirmed in my heart that He wanted me to come up here to a church of 100 people or whatever, to just help the work move forward up here, and just to advance the gospel in this region. It's an incredible opportunity. So I came up here that January. Of course, the church wasn't able to bring me on financially as a pastor or anything at that point. So I got a job with the help of somebody in our church at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And so I worked there for about 6 or 8 months. In the meantime, I was kind of part-time at the church, working as the youth pastor on the weekends, as well as just, a few other miscellaneous things. And then that September or October of 2013 is when I officially came on full time. And that was, such a huge blessing. But it's been an incredible 10 years. We've been here for just over 10 years now, and we've seen God do an amazing work. And so I know that's probably more than you asked for, but that's good.
That's good. And you came up there and things. And then Pastor Cary, what was it like when just God allowed for you and your son to be able to work together in ministry that way? And then I'd love to hear, again, we talked about it before, of just navigating that relationship of father, son, boss, staff member, pastor, youth pastor, worship pastor. What was that like for you? And I'm sure there was great joy in knowing that you were going to be serving alongside of your son.
Yeah, when we knew so he left for tour, and we knew shortly thereafter that we were headed to Connecticut, but we knew this by early June. God was really clearly directing us. So I called him one day, and I said, hey, and he had other offers. He had other pastors that had offered him jobs and really good opportunities, honestly. I said, hey, I know you've got a lot of offers and opportunity, and I never dreamed we would be working together, because I expected to be in California my whole life. I knew he did not want to serve at the ministry where we grew up, that he felt like the Lord was leading him elsewhere. And so I just assumed that I hoped it would be close, that we could, visit each other. I just never had the expectation. Well, when God was moving us to Connecticut, and I knew how much underwater I was going to be and needing help, I reached out. I said, hey, no pressure. I really want God's will for your life more than my will. But if you and Hillary, once you're married, if you guys wanted to come help us, we really can't even hire you, but Mom and I would love to serve together with you, and we're going to need all the help we can get. And I just encouraged him to pray about it, and we didn't talk about it for basically the next 6 or 8 weeks. And I think he could say, honestly, there was no pressure. Now, maybe there's intrinsic pressure because it's your dad talking. People laugh when I say no pressure. Right. They laugh, but I meant that.
Yeah.
And had he called and said, hey, I'm going to go to this church in Southern California or this church in South Carolina, I would have said, that's wonderful. I mean that from the depths of my heart. But he called me I want to say it was early August, may have been late July. And he said, I really believe God's telling us to come and help. And I was like, are you sure? I really didn't want to be pressure, relational pressure, emotional pressure. And I told him, get some counsel, seek some outside advice, vet that decision. Don't just, hear it from me. And God obviously put that together. And at that point, I did bring him on for weekend work. I had such respect that he came and just got a secular job. Almost no other person on staff right now did that. There's a couple that did, or a couple that said they were willing to. But I really respect how that worked. And we wanted the church family to see a natural segue instead of just this new pastor hiring his son. I didn't want to be accused of nepotism. So in the end, I really left it up to the deacons, even though I have bylaw authority to hire the team. I felt like since he was related to me, let's do this differently. And we gave him a 2-year internship. And at the end of 2 years, I brought it up to the deacons. I said, we need to decide what to do with Lance. And they were like, what do you mean? What to do with Lance? I said, well, you guys gave him an internship and that's over. So now you need to decide. And, God rolled forward with that. So it's been to me, a dream come true, to Lance, a nightmare. But that's because who wants to work with their dad, right? So I have the highest respect for him because he could go do many, many things in many, many other locations. And he's not here because he couldn't find a job. And he's not here because, his dad hired him. He is here because this is where God put him in, and he believes that. And I have really high respect and esteem for that because not many guys would want to work with their dad. And so thank you, Lance.
So Lance, let's talk about that because you brought it up, and Pastor Carey might be a little scared of this one.
No,
what's it like working with your dad?
Man, whatever.
Oh man,
what's it like working with dad?
The way that I would just describe it.
He won't say it, but it stinks.
I was about to go
we'd
serious
love to
on
hear
you,
about
but
just
yeah,
navigating that relationship. Because here's one thing for me, guys, personally, and this is something I just struggle with because of a little bit. I say who I am, but things I have to overcome. Work, especially ministry work, it can consume you, and you're thinking about it away from work and things like that, and family gatherings and stuff. So I'd love to hear again, Lance, like what's it like working with dad? How's that journey been? And feel free to share any stories you'd like. And then how do you navigate the separation at family gatherings and away from the ministry of this is father, son, family time with grandkids and all that, not time to talk about work?
Yeah. I would say just right off the bat, working with my dad has been and is still currently probably one of the top 5 blessings of my life right now. Like, just to throw that out there, like, it's been awesome. Has it all been awesome? No, it's been a journey, and for both of us. I'm not just saying that, as his son, but for him as the father having to deal with me. So, man, that's probably the best way to describe it, is just that it's been a journey. I think for anyone that gets into ministry, or really anyone that gets into their field of work, when you're in your early 20s, you don't think you know everything, but at the same time, you think you know everything. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's real easy to go, yeah, well, I don't know what I don't know, but internally, almost subconsciously, you in your attitude and like the way that you work with people or maybe interact with your boss, it's definitely my idea is better,
Okay.
Yeah. So I think there definitely was an element of that, like my first few years here. Even though my entire 10 years here, I've followed his leadership. We have the vast majority of us working together has been incredible, but we have had moments of tension and moments of headbutting. And I'll be honest with you, I attribute most of those times to just me growing as a human being. Me growing as a coworker, if you will, as an employee. Me growing as a son, and then, like I said, just as a human being, like learning what the professional world looks like, and learning what my lane is. And I've had a lot of executives and pastors and people at that level of leadership pour into my life outside of my dad. And a lot of people helped me realize, hey, this is, especially for my first few years here, not understanding that, context. What I mean by that is how to relate to each other. So there is an element of, man, when we get into staff meetings, how we relate to each other should be vastly different than when we're, alone in the car or, having a private conversation or at a family gathering. And I'd say, Dad, you could speak into this. I'll stop talking here in a second, but I would say the first 5 years, there was just a lot of like blurring of those lines, especially in, private conversations or family gatherings, where, work is flowing into it and stuff like that. And I think both he and I, mostly me probably, had to figure out how to navigate those things and how to respect each other, how to learn, okay, right now, like I'm talking to you as your son right now, or, hey, right now I'm talking to you as your employee. So I'm not gonna, make this personal. And I think 10 years in, we haven't fully figured it out, but we have grown a lot together. And I've told my dad this, but I've enjoyed the last 3 years of ministry more than any of my years of ministry so far. It's been incredible.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. What I heard you say there, and I want to just highlight for everyone, was a mutual respect for one another as not just a father and son, but as a, I could say boss, employee, or pastor and staff, and growing into the maturity to be able to have that. Mm-hmm. Because I think, I guess you watch a movie or something like that, if the son comes into the family business and dad's been, wildly successful in it, and then he comes in, he's just kicking his feet up on the desk, bossing everybody around like he's earned something, and I'm sure you've never done that, but the image of you sitting with your feet on your dad's desk is kind of funny in my head right now. But anyways, but no, and then you, instead of, then you grew through that. And so Pastor Cary, please speak into that same concept as well, and especially that division from, of work and family.
Yeah, I want to speak to the deeper core of it, and then the surface, because I think the surface is, what do we talk about at Thanksgiving and when we're around the family, and it really is impossible to separate entirely because it is our lives. Although Larry, Lance's brother, is in the insurance industry, he's a senior underwriter for Sun Life, and it is we work hard not to ostracize Larry unintentionally because we are talking about work things. And now I have a son-in-law that married my daughter that's also working in insurance. So I laughingly told Larry, you guys can talk insurance, me and Lance can talk insurance while we're at the table, So we there you go. We realize we can't separate all that completely because it is our life and we live and breathe it, and we love it. I would say on the outset, I agree with what Lance said. It's been an amazing privilege and opportunity and journey together that has been very real and raw, and it's probably been the most critical aspect of growth in each of us. Forging through these things has forced immense growth in both of us, in ways that you wouldn't have with other coworkers. You just roll forward. But Lance and I, because of our relationship, we kind of forced the issue. I would say one of the components is we don't avoid the conflict. We're willing to have conflict. We just don't leave it unresolved. We press into the conflict. We have hard conversations. We even get irritated at each other. But we know in the moments of irritation, we're working towards something. We're working towards resolution. So we don't just slam the door and walk away and never have the conversation again. We finish the conversation. And at the end of the conversation, we both see each other's view. We've both learned. We've both grown. We've both learned how to have the next conversation better. And those are all extremely valuable points. I can speak to the fact that Lance has taught me a whole lot about handling tense conversations. So and I'm not the best at it, but I'm better at it now than I was 5 years ago. But I'll tell you the dynamic that we really had to overcome, and I think we're pretty much overcoming it for the most part. What I would say is this is a dynamic that reared its head every day, and then every week, and then every month, and then every quarter, and now every now and then. And here's what it is. Lance and I had to forge a totally new relationship that we had never shared. We are now peers. We are now pastors and co-laborers. Up until that new relationship, we were father-son. And by the way, and now we're friends. Okay, and we've always been friends, but it's always been a father-son friendship. And now it's a co-working, co-laboring. I see him as a peer, and in some ways, as a mentor. But we came to this new relationship with one language. I'm dad and he's son. And that was the language we had forged for 21, 22, 23 years. And so every time he has an issue, by default, I'm hearing my defiant 15-year-old son, and I want to deal with rebellion. Okay. Like he's still a teenager, but every time I bring a directive, he's hearing dad instead of employer or instead of co-laborer. And so that new relationship, but filtering that new relationship through the old relationship was the problem. It was, we had to learn a new language of how do we move from just father and son to coworkers. And that took an immense amount of grace towards each other and listening to each other and having those hard conversations. And I would just say 10 years in, we are much further down the road in understanding that. And we were in our combustible moments. I would say we were both probably operating out of fear. He probably didn't think I was respecting him as a co-laborer, and I didn't feel like he was respecting me as an employer. And like you wouldn't do this to another pastor, but he's probably thinking, well, you wouldn't do this to another employee, So we just brought into that relationship all kinds of pre-existing relationship that you wouldn't bring into an employer-employee relationship. Like you'd never talk to your employer the way you talk to your dad, or
Right. Yeah.
That was kind of intrinsic. It was built in. So we had to learn how to separate those two functions and learn the new language. And that's where I say Lance has done an amazing job, and I really respect that, because most people wouldn't want to even take that journey. But I think there's a lot of fruit and a lot of enjoyment that we get to labor together. And I think there's a lot of synergy that the gifts and talents and strengths he's brought to our church have really blessed our church and blessed me more than I can say, and therefore blessed my ministry in ways that are exponential. So I just feel like I'm the recipient of a great gift, and I'm very thankful.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. The last thing I'd like for you to share with our listeners, and so I want you to think on it for a minute, because I'm going to talk to them about just our podcast and things going on. So, but from both of you, you just mentioned that, and I said, with this interview today, I did want to focus on the dynamic of working together that way. You hit on what it seems as though really helped propel you into a good place that you are now. And that was that new relationship that had to be forged over these last 10 years. And with any new relationship, I'm sure there's no, hack that makes it just go so much faster. But there might be some things you could share from a father's perspective, and Lance from a son's perspective. If you're going into business together or working in the same ministry, the same job, workplace, whatever it would be, that might help someone as they're getting ready to begin this journey. Would you think for just a moment on like what you would like to share with that young man and that father that are going into that type of relationship? And I'm going to just talk to our listeners real quick. Guys, today, Lance and Carey have been able to share so much from a journey that many of us, I believe, want to take. as fathers, starting a business or getting into to working in ministry, whatever it may be. I think it's always a dream of having the family business, passing things down, and being involved with your family and what God has called you to do. I love what how Pastor Cary defined success today, of just obedience to Jesus. And that obedience, it can be in a calling of the pastorate, of a business owner, of corporate America, of a 9-to-5. It's what God has called you to do. And in being obedient to Jesus, you're not going to find obedience to Jesus leaving your faith or your family struggling. They should be thriving. And that's why we exist, to help you kind of figure that out. We have our founding member package that was still available. If you'd like to help sponsor through financial support of the Men After God podcast, you can go to patreon.com/menaftergod. And for $8.33 a month for 1 year, you'll be known as a founding member forever. Lifetime 10% discount, 4 free coaching calls, free piece of merchandise, coaching calls with our training and nutrition coach, our finance coach, and then our relationship coach. And there's a few other extras that are in there for you. But at $8.33 a month for 12 months, and you're part of that. And don't forget, find us at facebook.com/groups/Men After God. Get involved in the community there of over 300 and some people. Great men like Pastor Cary and Lance and others are in there to just partner with you to help you achieve the success God has called you to with a thriving faith and family. All right, Pastor Cary, Lance, whoever wants to go first, I would love to hear what counsel and advice you would give to that father and son that are entering into that new relationship dynamic, whether in ministry, business, corporate world, whatever it would be. What are some things you would tell either yourselves or just them as they're getting into this?
Yeah, go ahead, Lance.
First off, I'd just say there are no, at least that I'm aware of, there are no hacks to, make this move quicker or anything like that. I think there are core principles that if you learn them quicker, I guess that's the hack, but there are no, it's like, hey, like do this trick or, try this in a meeting or whatever. There's probably some, practical tidbits that we could get into later, or if somebody wanted to reach out, but I would say, right off the bat, just 2 things that really stand out to me that have helped our relationship personally and our working relationship: vulnerability and respect. I think those are 2 huge things. I naturally am just because of my personality, I'm probably more of a vulnerable person than my father is. I'm far more willing just to be like, hey, this is how I'm feeling about this. I tend to kind of wear my emotions on my sleeve. And he's kind of the opposite. Where we're both similar is that we're very strong-willed and at times, I guess you could say stubborn or whatever. So we would get into conflicts, and I think early on those conflicts tended to be more explosive than now. Now I say explosive, it's not like he's throwing chairs across the room or anything like that.
Say, I've got this image in my head of you guys like chucking stuff at each other.
Just once. No, I'm just kidding.
Just once.
I broke his nose, and after that, he's been much better.
Yeah, I have been much more. Yes,
compliant.
Yes, exactly, compliant. No, it's nothing like that. When I'm talking about explosive, I'm just talking about that, relational, back and forth, conversing. And, sometimes early on that would get emotional and personal really, really fast. Now, 10 years later, just to, all cards out on the table, last week we had a conversation that I know if we would have had that conversation 9 years ago, it would have been, a 2-day thing that we're having to work through, relationally. But we very quickly resolved that within probably a 30-minute time span. Like it was unbelievable, actually. And we walked away, both of us, I think, walked away feeling great about, moving forward and respected and like we were heard. And honestly, just more locked in than ever. To me, what drives that is, again, vulnerability and respect. And it took a long time to learn those things. But vulnerability being, hey, Dad, the way you said this in this meeting, I don't know if you've thought about this, but it kind of came across this way. Or, the staff, when you said that, probably looked at this way, and it's him saying the same thing. Hey, when you said that, in front of these people or whatever, it came across this way. You need to work on that. those things, us being vulnerable and saying, hey, this not just bothered me. I'm not talking about being ultra sensitive about things. Like, to me, that's like that can be set aside. I'm talking about, legitimate, either relational or, professional issues that need to be addressed. And I think the more that we learn to just be vulnerable about those things and be willing to work through those things, we got through them quicker. And then just respect in those conversations. It's pretty common that in a staff meeting that you'll hear me be, vocally supportive of, the vision that he's casting or the direction that he's wanting to take as a church. What I'm trying to do is go, hey, I'm in full support of this, as the son. I think so many times the father-son relationship in a staff meeting or in a, board meeting or whatever your context is, I think the energy can be felt there. And at times our staff has felt that negatively, because of me or him or whatever. And so what I do just in terms of respect is I'm really trying not just to, validate him carte blanche, but when it is something that's in his lane and he's vision casting and he's leading us forward, I try to make sure that vocally I'm showing respect and admiration, because I have that, in my heart. And so I want that to come out and kind of bleed into the room and into the meeting. And so I think I think those are two things: vulnerability and respect. Those can be played out in a more public context, like I just talked about, staff meetings, board meetings, or they can be played out in a more personal context. But those, to me, those are two hacks, if you will.
I would
Cary?
start with speaking to the dads, and you were mentioning like a family business, which I hate to think of church or ministry as a family business. So just to set that caveat, I never think of it that way, but I know your podcast is to entrepreneurs and business owners and things.
Yeah.
The first thing I would say is set your kids free. Don't begin with the expectation that they're going to want to do what you do or inherit what, manage what you grow or develop. Too many parents impose their ideals and dreams and ambitions onto their kids, and that's the surest way to break a relationship. It's oppressive. To hold your kids hostage to your expectations is a terrible way to go forward. They belong to God. He entrusted them to you to raise them, which I wish I could go back to and talk about the school thing a little bit, because the school doesn't raise the kids. The school doesn't cultivate their hearts and isn't responsible for managing their emotions and all their development like the parents are. That's why my perspective always trumped the school's perspective or the teacher's perspective, respectfully. But parents, I think we got to be careful about ladening our kids with the burdens of our assumptions, our agendas, our ideals for their lives. That's just not fair. If in the process of releasing them, God gives them a heart and a call to team up, then count that as a bonus, an extra blessing. Even throughout this 10-year journey, I've had numerous conversations with Lance to say, hey, you're free. If you want to pastor, if you want to plant a church, if you have an opportunity to go somewhere, I'm not going to stand in your way, and I will cheer you on. I feel like that's the most open-handed way to let Lance follow God. And that's what is kind of that mutual respect towards God's individual call, and that he is a man of God and can follow God's leading without my intervention is so foundational to everything. The second thing I would say, if it does create and come to a partnership and a teaming up, then be willing to press into conversations that are uncomfortable and even confrontational and even combustible. It's not the end of the world. Like, you don't have to be mean to each other. You don't have to call each other names, but we're family. We feel very deeply. It doesn't have to come to a fist fight, but press through the emotion. And I'll tell you what, my regrets are I say how I feel without thinking about what is really underneath all that. And where you want to get is through the emotions, and you want to articulate what is what am I most concerned about? What is the fear or the core concern driving this? What I do is it's almost a ministry PTSD. I see the worst possible outcome of the most innocuous situation, and I assume that's where it's going to go, and I start there, and then I work my way back and find out, oh, it wasn't that bad. It was just, So what I try to do now, sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't, but I try to think, what is my main concern before I jump to a conclusion or I'm afraid of some bad outcome. Why am I uncomfortable with that? What bothers me about that? And when I am successful at identifying that and then sharing that, I find that avoids the conflict. And if it's with me and Lance, this works with everybody, but if it's with me and Lance, he's like, oh, okay, yeah. So here's what I would say. Let's do it this way. But if I start with the negative outcome and I'm like, this is going to happen, he's like, what are you talking about? That's not what I intended, or that's not what I meant. Suddenly it gets emotional. So I think just learning how to have those conversations by learning how to understand what's going on in your own emotions, and why. That's been my journey, and I'm still on it, but I'm trying.
I love that. Thank you both so much. The one thing I don't think we brought out, I want to say before we sign off here, is that one thing I see just as an outsider looking into your relationships is just the mutual elevation of one another. And Lance, you kind of hinted on it there when you were talking about promoting the vision and things that he's casting and being there for him. And then Pastor Cary, you do that with Lance and just his music and how he pursues after that. And we'll make sure we're going to share the Emmanuel Worship album from 2020. And forgive me, there's been another one come out. Is that right, Lance? You guys put another one out?
Several.
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, let me just time out. Okay, let me tell you, I'm his biggest fan, and not because I'm his dad. I've listened to music my whole life. I love music. I've grown up with a dad that did music. Lance has written and recorded, and his team, some amazing material, and it is among my favorites. So that's the truth.
Yeah, we've got it. I've got it on my playlist here, and so we're going to put that out there as well. And so, again, he got an award. I want to highlight that real quick, Lance. Didn't you get an award for your writing and your music?
There was a songwriting competition that is broken down into 4 quarters. It's a national songwriting competition, and it's broken down into 4 quarters a year. And I got first place in one of those quarters. So whatever conclusion you want to derive from that.
So what I heard from his song
what I
heard
chosen
from the
as
humble man is nationally recognized artist and musician is what I heard there. That's what I heard. And so,
famous.
But in all seriousness, and there you go. And even in the joking back and forth here, I mean, it's just evident of how much you both desire for each other to, again, pursue after what God has for them with everything they have, and you elevate that, you promote that. And I think that's huge. And I really love seeing that, just from my perspective to you guys. And I'm just very thankful to know you. Guys, thank you for being on here today. We're coming up on the end of our time, so I really appreciate you giving time over and just the value you've added. We'll make sure to get all the links and everything we need to in the show notes. Make sure to pick up Pastor Cary's newest book. It'll be out once this is or before this is aired. Steady Strength, available, I'm sure, on Amazon and other places books are sold. And then we'll have some direct links there to it. And then be sure to download Lance's worship albums off of iTunes and anywhere else you listen to music. I think they're on Spotify as well. Guys, thank you so much for being here today. To our listeners, we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Men After God podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and keep up with the show by following us at facebook.com/menaftergod. You can also reach out to Dustin personally at dustin@seekconsulting.us with any questions or for coaching on being a man after God. Until next time.